Welcome back to another Westies Angling. You're joining me in the tackle room today for the start of a new series which I'm calling Method Feeder Masterclass, where I'm going to go through the ins and outs of everything to do with method feeder fishing. And today we're starting off on how to tie your own method feeder hook lengths. So I'm going to be going through everything in total detail so that beginners out there will be able to follow along with the steps and you literally won't be able to go wrong. I want this to be a comprehensive series covering everything from hook lengths like we're doing today, to the tackle that you're going to need, to set up, to fishing at different times of year, to bait. We're going to cover it all, folks, in this series. And the weather outside today is abysmal, so I thought there's no better time to start this than today in the winter. So that's what we're going to be doing. So I'm going to start off by going through every single component that you need to tie up your own method feeder hook lengths at home. But not only that, why I use them as well, and why I make the little changes that I make to my hook lengths so that I guarantee you'll put more carp on the bank when tying your own. So you might be wondering, why should I tie up my own hook lengths? Why can't I just go and buy the shop bought ones? Yes, of course you can, but in my opinion, I have lost so many fish on shop bought hook lengths. They're always stronger if you tie them up at home. That's just my opinion, but I've lost a load of fish on shop bought hook lengths and I just don't use them anymore unless it's an absolute emergency and I've not had time to tie any up, because this can be time consuming, but on days like this where you just can't get out on the bank, it's perfect to sit down and tie a load of rigs up. Right, folks, without further ado, I'm going to show you all these components. I'm going to talk you through why I use them and why I choose certain hooks, certain bait application methods and stuff like that. Let's get into the video. So as you've probably seen, folks, I've got everything laid out neatly in front of me that we're going to need to tie up our own hook lengths today. As you can see, I've already tied one up here, which I'm going to go through with you in detail in a minute, showing you the rig mechanics and how it works and how it's effective. And I've also tied on a method feeder there as a bit of an example onto some mainline. But let's start off with the bait application method. So how do you attach the bait to your feeder hook? Well, there's a few different ways. By far my favourite is to use bait bands. Now, these are my own brand bait bands. They're super strong. Now, I'll put links to all these components in the description for you as well. So I'm going to take all the hassle out of this. You aren't going to be searching around on different websites for all these things. All the links are going to be in this description for you. I'll take the time to do that. So I've got some 3x5mm bait bands there. Now, the reason I love bait bands is they're very undetectable for fish. They're nice and soft. And how carp feed and how most fish feed is they use the mouths as hands. So what you don't want is you don't want a carp or a fish feeling a hard plastic, really, like these quick stops. Now, I do use quick stops occasionally, but I mostly use them for river fishing or for applying big baits or for applying really soft baits. So that's the reason I do use quick stops sometimes, but mostly I attach my baits using bait bands because they're very versatile. You can attach worms with these, you can attach corn, you can attach wafters, you can attach pellets, which just about covers everything that you're going to need to use on the method feeder. Now, what I don't suggest you do is I don't suggest you directly hook bait onto the feeder hook, because that's going to obscure the point of the hook and you want all that point showing so that you nail the fish every single time. So you want to attach it in a way that's away from the hook itself on a hair. So you can hair rig them, you can use a bait band like we're going to go through today. You could also use a 7mm bayonet like these. I don't particularly like bayonets, especially with smaller wafters, because I find that they actually turn the wafters into sinkers, which is obviously not what you want. Just a little side note while we're on the subject of bayonets, what I sometimes use, and I've had absolutely mega good success on this, is using an 8mm bait screw like this, tying a slightly longer hair on a normal size feeder hook using a carp wafter. Sometimes having that slightly bigger, slightly more visible hook bait can give you really good success with the bigger fish, I've found. So don't be scared of doing that. On a normal size method feeder, using a normal size feeder hook, because they're a bit sharper than carp hooks, so you don't need the weight of a big method feeder to set it. But I've done really well on this in the past, but it's not something that the match guys will like, because, I don't know, it doesn't look pretty, or it seems awkward, or it seems unusual. But I promise you, this rig would work on a method feeder. But you need a slightly longer hair, as I've said, and you've got loads of movement there around that little O swivel there and the bait screw. So it's got good movement. It's going to be perfectly balanced because of the weight of the bait screw. That's why you need the bait screw, so it doesn't pop up and sits on the bottom, sits on the method feeder like that. But always test them in the margin to make sure that they're balanced. If you find that the wafter's popping up, just trim it down a touch. Nothing wrong with trimming them down. Well, there you go. I've had good success on that. Or you can use a quick stop, and they're all tied in much the same way. So let's go on to hooks. You can use any brand of hook as long as it's got a slightly outturned eye on them. The reason I use an outturned eye is because when you use a straight eye or a slightly inturned eye, the distance between the hook point and the line becomes narrower, and that gives you less hooking capability than a nice wide gape feeder hook with an outturned eye that opens it out. Sizes are obviously corresponding to whatever bait that you're using. So if you're using worms, you might want to use a size 10 feeder hook. If you're using wafters like an 8mm, you're going to need a size 12 hook so it critically balances. Or if you're using an even smaller wafter, maybe a size 14 and maybe a size 16. But we'll cover more about that in the bait section of this series. In terms of line, my go-to line for method feeder fishing is 12-pound Guru n-guage. Now, a lot of you might be thinking, oh, that's too heavy. Why are you using such a heavy line for feeder fishing? It is very, very, very low diameter line. It's super thin and it's super flexible. And believe it or not, this does break at less than 12 pounds. So I use 9 pound through the winter, and then during the summer I'll use 12 pound, and sometimes I'll even go up to 12 pound main line if I'm fishing for fish over 15 pound on the method feeder. Okay, so tools that we're going to use, we're going to need a needle or a rig tying tool like this one here. Again, links in the description for these. You're going to need yourself some 0.3 to 0.1 internal diameter rig tubing. That's Guru, that particular make. That just pins your hair against the shank of the hook. And I promise you, adding a tiny little bit of this to your rig will increase your hookup rate by at least 5-fold. Then you're going to need yourself a decent pair of scissors. And what I find incredibly important for tying perfect 4-inch method feeder rigs is using a rig case like this. Now, this goes up to 6-inch, but I very rarely tie my method feeder rigs any longer than 4-inch. 4 inches is absolutely optimum. 3 inches is just a little bit too short, and 6 inches, a carp's going to be able to suck and blow that rig out all day long, and I promise you, you'll hook more carp on a 4-inch method feeder rig, because what happens is carp feed very, very low to the feeder. Most fish feed like this, and they'll be coming in, they'll suck and blow all the bait off there. You want the hook to catch as the carp is blowing that rig out, and bang, it hits the full weight of the method feeder, and that's what sets the hook, and you're going to be absolutely nailed there with these super sharp, strong feeder hooks. My go-to hooks are Korum all-rounder, but Preston Innovations make a really good feeder hook with an outturned eye. Always test your wafters in the margin first, just to make sure that they are critically balanced. You want a nice slow sink. But folks, that's just about everything that you're going to need to tie up your own method feeder hook lengths at home. So the first thing we're going to do is I'm going to show you a finished rig so you know exactly what we're trying to achieve when we're tying one up. Then we're going to tie one up, then we're going to have a bit of fun, and we're going to see just how quick I can tie up a method feeder hook length. So I'll show you more about this side of the rig when I go through feeders and stuff like that on a later video in this series. But here is the method feeder hook length in all its glory. So it's very, very simple. So as you can see, you attach it to your quick stop with a figure of 8 loop knot, and that just hooks on. The figure of 8 loop knot is a very strong knot, and I will be showing you how to tie that. It's very hard to go wrong with it as well. Then you're going to tie your hook on to the line with a knotless knot. You can see the tiny little bit of rig tube in there that's just pinning that hair to the shank of the hook. And as I've said to you, that is probably one of the most important components of this rig. Is it essential? No. Will you increase your hookup rate by having that little bit of tubing on? Yes, 100%. Then you can see I've got my band tied on there, which I think is probably the part that most of you struggle with the most, with a tiny loop and another figure of 8 loop knot. And as I've said, these are my own brand of bait bands, which are ultra strong. I tested maybe, I don't know, 7 or 8 kinds, and these were ultra strong. They're clear, they're soft, and very undetectable for fish. Now, instead of the bait band, as I've said to you, you can use a quick stop, which are ideal for meats and other soft baits where you need a little bit more resistance than the band, but you can still stretch out a band and hook corn, her rig, meats using a band and stuff like that. You've seen me do it a number of times on the video if you're following the channel. If you're not following the channel, get yourself subscribed, folks. What are you doing? So there we go. That's the rig. It's incredibly simple, and you can see there your outturned eye, which has a nice wide gape between the line and the point of the hook, which gives a nice clearance there so that can drop nicely into a carp's mouth. Let me tie one up with a straight eye and I'll show you the difference. So there we go, folks. That is a straight-eyed hook next to the outturned eye hook, and you can see how narrow the distance is between the line and the point of the hook. That is decreasing the hooking capability of this rig. So that's an example of why you don't want to use a straight-eyed hook, because you will not be catching as many fish. So you might be thinking, Westy, why do they even make a straight-eyed hook? Well, really, you can use them with kickers, which slightly increases the distance between the line and the point of the hook there. Or what you can do is you can use braid, which is a lot more supple than mono. Right, folks, let's tie a rig up. So I hope you're going to be able to see this clearly enough. We're starting off with our Guru n-guage mono here, and we want to cut ourselves a section to work with of, I don't know, it's cheap mono, so I always cut more than I need. Let's do about a foot. You definitely don't need that much, but there you go. So you've got your foot of mono there. Then we want to take one of our hooks. Now I'm using a size 10 for demonstration purposes here because it's bigger and easier to see, but I usually use a size 12 Korum allrounder because I tend to use 7x8mm wafters, and the size 12 balances them perfectly, so that's what I use. Let's get one of our hooks out. Now we're going to cut ourselves a section of tubing, getting everything ready here for tying rigs. Now I usually get a few bits of each component ready. I'm probably going to cut there about 2 or 3 mil of the low diameter tubing. So we've got what we need there to start the rig. The first thing I'm going to show you is how to tie up a simple hair rig before I show you how to tie on the band or bayonet or quick stop, because it's really handy to know just in case you wanted to tie up simple hair rigs like this. Maybe you wanted to use a boilie, a small boilie on the method feeder. You can hair rig them on. And obviously this is what we're trying to achieve. So I'll show you how to tie the hair itself, and then we'll move on and I'll show you how to tie the band on perfectly every single time. To tie a hair, you literally just tie a figure of 8 loop knot in this line here. So to tie a figure of 8 loop knot, I'll show you that first. You fold the line back on itself, you wet it because it helps tie the knot. Then you create a loop in the line and trap it with your fingers. So you've got that loop over the top of the other loop there, hoping you can see this on the camera like that, and you've trapped it. Then you want to take the bigger loop, go around the smaller loop that you've just made, and back through into that loop. Now, this is where it helps if you have a rig picker like this. These are absolutely awesome for tying rigs. I use it every single time without fail, this or a needle, and then what you do is you go through the smaller loop, hook the bigger loop, and pull that back through. Now, you know that you've tied the figure of 8 loop knot correctly here because it forms an 8 in the line. Now what I do, and this is really important, if you want to make your loop smaller, simply take your rig pick, put it in the top of the 8-shaped loop and pull the tag end and the main line, and that'll shrink the loop down as tight as you need it. And it's important that you use a needle or one of these because you can really get that tight. And then obviously you just slide this out because it's an even shape. Don't use a baiting needle for this because you won't be able to get them tight. The baiting needle will get caught at the end. Then wet it. I put my rig pick in and then just gently pull that down. And there you go. That's your figure of 8 loop knot tied. And you've got a small hair rig in the end. But folks, we don't want a hair rig. I was just showing you in case you wanted to hair rig a boilie on or something like that. Or just use a hair rig in general. We're doing the same thing, but this time, instead of tying the hair rig in the end, we're going to tie the band in. So we thread the band on, and this is a really important step as well. Make sure when you're tying your band on, you wet the line. It makes it so much easier to tie the figure of 8 loop knot. It just sticks these two pieces of line to each other a lot better, and the loop doesn't sort of like coil up on you and stuff like that. So you threaded your band on. Then you want to make a loop again, as if we're tying this into the figure of 8 loop knot, which we are, and then go round that loop, back through, and there you've got your band inside the figure of 8 loop knot. Now, where a lot of people struggle, again, is making the loop tight against this bait band, because we don't want it so tight that the knot cuts into this band. That's not what we want to do. We want this band to be able to move freely around a loop. It gives a better presentation. It gives a more natural presentation of baits. Again, folks, there's the figure of 8 loop knot with the bait band in the end. Get your rig pick, and then you want to go through the top loop of the figure of 8. Trap the bait band against your finger and gently pull the tag end and the main bit of the line down tight like that. So you've pulled it tight against your rig pick, which is going to leave perfectly sized loop in the end. And you pull your rig pick out so it's nice and smooth, wet it again, and then gently pull the tag end and the main line. And there you go. You've got a perfect little loop with your bait band attached. Nice, neat figure of 8 loop knot. That's the hardest bit of the rig there, folks. Some of these shots, because obviously we're dealing with such a small rig here, it's really hard to get on camera, but I think you'll have got the gist there. Next part of it, we're going to trim this tag end coming off the figure of 8 loop knot. Make sure you trim the tag end and not your main piece of line. Now, the easiest way of attaching our silicone tubing to the shank of the hook is thread it down the line all the way to near enough the top of the band, and then we're going to take our feeder hook, and then what we're going to do is hook it through the tubing with the point facing the band. So we're threading it through that way. We're going to go all the way around the shank of the hook until it's pinned to the back of the hook. Now, we can adjust our hair length here. I like my hair and band just off the top of the shank of the hook like that. I don't like it too tight. I think that's absolutely perfect, but you can play about with the length of the hair. So that's the hardest part of the rig done there, folks. So what we need to do now is take our line, thread it back through the shank of the hook because we're going to tie our knotless knot. So at this stage, your rig should look like that just before the knotless knot. Then we want to grab the hook and we want to see whereabouts the join is on the eye, because it's sharp sometimes at the point of that join. So we want to wrap away from the join this direction. So wrapping away 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 times. Pin it with your finger, bit of moisture, then back through the eye of the hook, back to front, and then pull everything down. And there we go. That's the rig pretty much tied. A little bit of a Westies angling tip, and why I've told you that you need one of these rig cases is to make them perfect every single time. So at this stage, where we've still not tied our figure of 8 loop knot, so we can attach it to your method feeder insert, what I do is I'll hook the hook onto the end. Obviously, all these rig boxes have the 4-inch mark there, so we go around that pillar tight, and then you come round with your other finger and pin the two sides of the line together and just lift the rig off that pillar. That means you've got a perfect 4-inch rig there once you've tied it. So again, wet both sides, loop, round that loop, take our rig pick, pull that loop through, and I'm going to show you this now. It is going to be a perfect method feeder rig. Wet it down. You want a nice big loop in this side, folks. Don't make this loop too tight. Put your finger through it. Put your little finger through it. Grab the hook and just pull gently. Put some tension in it. Don't forget, this is going to have a carp on the end, so you want to make sure it's strong. Then get the tag end. Gently pull the tag end. Cinch that knot down. And then you want to trim. Don't trim too closely. You don't need to. But you want to trim that tag end off, and make sure you're trimming the tag end here. The amount of times that I've cut the actual rig after just tying it like this is an absolute joke. But just make sure you're trimming the tag end, not your actual rig. Boom. Hook length is tied, folks. Now I'm going to put that in our rig case and I'm going to show you it's perfect. And what it does is it tensions out here. There we go. So you've got that rig box providing tension on that line so it stays perfect. Let me give you a closer look at that rig in the box. Now folks, I'm hoping that was a simple tutorial and all of you will have been able to follow that at home. Now obviously if you wanted to use a quick stop, you do it in the exact same way as we tied the band. I know I went into ultra detail there, and I'm hoping it was a no stone unturned style of tutorial that was easy enough to follow along with at home. If it was helpful for you, all I ask that you do is make sure you hit that subscribe button for the rest of this series, and also there's plenty of other method feeder fishing videos on the channel. Maybe you've watched some of them before, but you haven't managed to subscribe yet. Now's your chance. Get that subscribe button clicked and you won't miss the rest of this series. Right, so if you only wanted the tutorial, now's your time to switch off. But if you want to see a little bit of fun and see how quick I can actually tie up one of these method feeder hook lengths, stick around because we're going to do it. So let's get my phone timer out. And I've not got anything ready apart from getting the hooks out and a couple of small sections of the rig tubing. That's all I've done. Not cut the line or anything like that. I bet nobody's ever done this before, have they? I bet this is going to be a world record. So if you think you can beat me, tag me in a video on how quick you can tie them up. I don't know whether you're going to be able to see this timer, but let's prop it up there. And then we're going to see just how quick I can do this before we end the video. Right, so game face, Westy, game face. Let's do it. This is going to be a laugh. I don't work well under pressure, folks. Right, let's do it. Let's go. Right, first thing we need to do is tie the band on. So we'll get one of our bands. Missed the hole 6 times. Well done, Westy. Wet the line, figure of 8 loop knot. Rig picker tool through the loops. Then we need to make sure this loop's nice and tight. There we go. Pull that tag end there, kids. Don't do that. Don't pull it with your teeth. Use a rig puller. I'm just eager to set this world record. That's going to be a nice tight knot. Just knocked me timer there. Oh, my hands are shaking. The pressure, folks. I'm crumbling. Right. Hook through. This is probably the trickiest part. I have to pin my finger. It's harder with size 10 hooks, this bit. Right, that's perfect. So, ready to tie our knotless knot. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Back through, measure it up on our rig box. This is a shambles, this, folks. I can definitely do it quicker than this. Do it quicker than this off camera. Ow! Stab myself. Tighten that down, trim it up, and then we're done. Tag end off, done. So I was really slow clicking that timer off then, so it's probably about 2.5 minutes per hook length. But there we go. Give you a closer look at that hook length so you know that I've not completely fumbled it. Perfectly tied. So we'll put it in our rig box with the other one. There you go, bit of practice and you'll soon be tying them up that quick. Well folks, a little bit of fun at the end there, but I honestly hope this video has been helpful for you. If it has, like I said, the only thing you need to do to support the channel is hit that subscribe button, and that way you won't miss another video in this series. So if you're a beginner, this series is going to be perfect for you, because on the next episode we're going to be talking through all the different types of method feeders and the uses. We're going to be talking about the tackle that you'll need for method feeder fishing, and we'll also be talking about bite indication, which fits in with the tackle. So I just want to say thanks very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next Wes is Angling.